Once again, it is a conversation. And once again, I'm Adrienne Lawrence. This time, though, I have for you the chair of You Are the Power. Also, he was the 2020 Libertarian vice presidential candidate. That's Spike Cohen. Thanks for joining us, Spike.
Thank you for having me, Adrienne.
Now, Spike, I understand there's an issue that's kind of close to your heart, which happens to be homeless veterans abuse. And you know of a recent incident coming out of Gastonia, North Carolina?
Yep, that's correct. So what happened basically, I was first alerted to this by followers on social media who told me about what happened. The long story short is that a homeless veteran by the name of Joshua Rohrer was accused on a 911 call of actually not even breaking the law. The original 911 call said that he was, quote, using his dog to make people feel sorry for him and give him money, and that ain't right. Now, that's also not against the law in Gastonia or anywhere else in North Carolina, but the police still came out and they ended up arresting him. They ended up separating him from his service dog, which violates federal law, and they ended up tasing his service dog as well. The officer who arrested him and tased the dog claimed that he was resisting arrest and that the dog tried to bite him or did bite him. And there's a very easy way to show whether or not that's true, and that's to release the body cam footage. And guess what the police are refusing to do is release the body cam footage. Those who have seen it, Joshua and his friend, and as well as eyewitnesses that were there, all say that that's not what happened. Joshua was complying. The dog wasn't even facing the officer when it happened. Unfortunately, the officer, Morris Taylor III, his father is the head of internal affairs there, and so it looks like they're just trying to bury it.
Yeah, definitely. It seems that nepotism is always fun to work with. But in terms of this man, because as you're telling me this story, it just, my heart bleeds for him. Yep. This thought that they're going to separate you from your pet, but also that this is your service dog, yep. But then that they tase the animal? Come yep. on, that seems absolutely excessive. Are Gastonia police saying that that's completely okay and within protocol, given their claim that the dog wouldn't comply?
Well, so far, all they're claiming is that the dog tried to bite the officer, but they're not actually releasing the proof of that, which would be the body cam footage. They actually fought it in court, saying that they didn't want to release it because it could jeopardize the privacy of Joshua Rohrer, who was asking for it to be released. They also keep moving his trial back because after the trial commences, they will have to release it anyway. This trial again is for a misdemeanor panhandling charge, which is usually a citation. The proof, they just don't want it to come out. And the problem is this in isolation would be bad enough, but this is actually part of a long pattern they've had. There's a pastor in Gastonia named Moses Colbert. He has had a homeless shelter that he was operating out of his church for a couple of years, and they made him shut it down in January. And since then, 17 homeless people have died in Gastonia in just the past few weeks alone. Several years ago, there was a supposed rogue group within the Gastonia Police Department that apparently no one else within Gastonia police or government knew about, who were going around brutalizing and terrorizing the homeless population there. So this is part of a long-standing history of abuse of homeless and veterans in Gastonia. The list goes on and on. I could spend an hour talking about all the examples we came up with, but we're not going to stop fighting until we get justice for Joshua and for the entire community there in Gastonia.
Yes, and so I would assume, being a lawyer myself, to think that someone is representing Joshua pro bono, correct?
That is not my understanding. We're actually trying to get help from groups like Institute for Justice and others to try to get Joshua the help he needs on the legal front, because that not just representing him in court, but eventually there's going to have to be a lawsuit that comes from all of this. I hesitate to speak on that because my understanding is that's a bit of a undefined situation there. But we are working with Joshua to get him the legal defense he needs to be able to not just fight this in court, but also to be able to get some kind of compensation for what has happened here, especially once the body cam footage has been released. But the long story short is we're not going to stop fighting until we get justice. I will be back there with many other members of the community this coming May. It's on their meetings are on the first Tuesday of every month. We'll be right there at the city council meeting again. Last time the police tried to block us from coming in, that blew up in their face when the media came back to cover it. They ended up letting us back in. So hopefully they won't try that again, but we're going to keep coming until we get justice.
Yes, and can you tell me, as of today, has the dog been released to Joshua?
Actually, unfortunately, the dog passed away. Sunshine passed away while Joshua was still being held. She was released to, I believe, an acquaintance of Joshua, and Sunshine, trying to find Joshua, ran away and ended up getting hit. Now, thankfully, Joshua does have a new service dog named Justice, but unfortunately, as a result of this, not only was he separated temporarily, but permanently. Sunshine did pass away as a result of this.
Wow, that's heartbreaking. It truly is. And as far as your focus on the situation in Gastonia, is there any particular reason that drew you to it?
During the campaign for vice president, when I was running for vice president, and since then, the entire reason I'm involved in political activism is because there are too many people who are being treated as victims by the system that we have. This is one of many examples of that. And so any of time that examples of this are brought to my attention, I often go and speak at city councils and county councils and at rallies and so forth across the country to try to bring justice to those who are experiencing injustice. This happens to be relatively in my backyard, just a few hours away from where I am. And so I've committed myself to continue going there until we get justice for Joshua, Pastor Moses, the homeless and veteran communities in Gastonia, and everyone in Gastonia and around the country who wants to see those who are in power held accountable when they do wrong.
Yes, and I think that's something that most of us are definitely behind, because too often is it the case that individuals who abuse their power and do wrong by others, that they get away with a slap on the wrist, if anything. And so when I was looking at the issue in terms of homeless veterans, one thing I came across is that number one, it's completely and totally undetermined how many there are out there. But according to HUD, their numbers and estimating that at least in about 2021, there was almost about 20,000 veterans that were unhoused across the United States, which is about 8% of all sheltered adults experiencing homelessness in the US. And it really struck me as well that most homeless vets are in Los Angeles, the highest count by number, because if you're looking at about 20,000 homeless veterans across the United States, about 9,000 of that number, or excuse me, 11,000 of the number is in Los Angeles. And that really struck me, and I assume it's because of the weather and the area, I'm sure Skid Row as well, knowing that you can remain there and no one is going to kick you out. But it does raise a number of issues.
It does, and I also think those numbers are probably grossly undercounted. If we compare it to other examples of veterans representing a disproportionately harmed community in this country, something like 1 out of every 10 people in prison is a veteran. Many of them are there for victimless crimes. These are people that swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the American people against all enemies, foreign and domestic. They get sent overseas, usually to fight and kill and die for our domestic enemies. And then when they come home, if they're fortunate enough not to come home in a flag-draped casket, they often come home with PTSD, traumatic brain injuries, and other chronic health problems. They are, no other word can describe it, they are neglected by the health system that was promised to them, and they often end up homeless or in prison or much worse. And this is just one anecdotal example of the harm that is being done to people across this country, especially veterans and homeless people. And that's why we continue to fight for justice.
Yes, that's incredibly important, and you're absolutely right. The fact that these individuals go out there and sacrifice their lives and really put their lives on hold often to protect us all, only to experience a degradation at the hands of law enforcement or in other ways by the system where they can't even locate housing or the care that they need, and thus end up on the streets unhoused. And to know that this is essentially part of the problem and what happened to Joshua that created this situation here, it's extremely disheartening.
It is, and it's also an example of Gastonia's police have unfortunately have demonstrated themselves over and over again not to be held accountable. There was a situation with a veteran, a 74-year-old veteran, and I'm forgetting his name at the moment, but he was a 74-year-old veteran who was at home recovering from surgery. They performed a wellness check at midnight, broke into his home and ended up shooting him because when he heard people breaking into his home, he reached for his pistol. This was a 74-year-old veteran who had committed the crime of recuperating from surgery at home. Of course, the government of Gastonia investigated itself and found that it did nothing wrong. This is just, and we could go on with constant examples. And I wish this was something just exclusively in Gastonia, but we hear this across the country. People in government, police officers, government agents who do harm, and then they are held not to be accountable, and that everything was fine, and any evidence that could potentially demonstrate the harm they've done suddenly either disappears or is blocked from being released. And if we can get them to release this, and if we can demonstrate the harm they did to Joshua, then hopefully that begins a domino effect in Gastonia and across the Southeast and across the country to actually hold bad actors in government accountable.
Yes, because accountability is necessary. And I understand with your work for being the chair of You Are the Power, are you involved in anything in addition to this fight for Joshua?
Absolutely. We killed a really bad abortion ban bill in Manatee County, Florida. We were involved in fighting eminent domain abuse, where a city council in Russell, Kentucky was trying to basically steal, using eminent domain, a privately owned convalescent home for people with mental illness who were elderly, so that they could build a parking lot and a green space. And all the city council members just happened to own all the property adjacent to it. We were in Columbus, Ohio, working with other groups to put an amendment on the ballot there for this coming election to end qualified immunity in Ohio. Wherever there is a need for justice, You Are the Power will be there. We have just gotten started in the last year, and we will continue to do so.
Wow, it sounds like you all are very much invested in a number of things to uplift our society in toto, which is a very important thing, especially right now. And so in terms of involvement, and if people want to partner with you to join any of your causes, to speak up, uplift, where can they find out more about You Are the Power?
Absolutely. So our website is youarethepower.net. We're in the process of launching our social media presence, but the website is youarethepower.net. I'm also covering it on my social media. If you look for Spike Cohen, you can find me pretty easily on all major social media. And right now, what we're trying to do is grow a grassroots army of nonpartisan, localized, single issue activism that centers around criminal justice reform, civil liberties protection, holding bad actors in government accountable, and advocating for policies at the local level that help people to thrive and live their most prosperous and free and just life.
All right, it sounds like you are doing a lot of work, and we only have about 30 seconds left, but what is next for you now that you've passed on and moved on from the vice presidential candidate kind of race?
More of this until I'm asked not to attend anymore. I'm continuing to go around the country and fight for justice. I'll be back in Gastonia on May 3rd for their next city council meeting, and wherever I'm needed to go and help fight for liberty and justice and holding bad actors accountable and helping those who don't have the power to fight on their own. I will do it to the extent that I can.
All right, then. Well, thank you so much for your time and for joining us. That's Chair of You Are the Power, Spike Cohen.
Thank you, Adrian.